Before I begin today's story, let me ask you a question. How can you be sure that everyone you've met in your life is actually human? What I'm about to share are my personal experiences working in the funeral business, and the taboos of the industry. In this line of work, dealing with the deceased daily, encountering strange and supernatural occurrences is inevitable. But there's one rule that can never be broken: if you encounter a reanimated corpse, you must never touch it. Such entities are extremely malevolent, and one wrong move could cost you your life. Alright, folks, the thrilling story you've been waiting for is here. Remember to grab a faint-hearted friend. Here we go. My name is Alex, and I own a funeral home. Yes, the kind with full service advertised on the sign out front, everything from catering and hearse rentals to feng shui consultations and grave site selections. You name it, I do it. My business thrives on being all-encompassing. That's why, in a small town like Willow Creek, which doesn't have a huge population, my business is the best. Of course, another reason is that I've never received a single negative review from a client. Just this morning, as I opened for business, I welcomed my first client of the day. At 6 a.m., right after I rolled up the shop's security door, I saw a young man, probably around 20 years old, dressed in a dirty green school uniform, squatting by the entrance. Young people like him are a rare sight in a quiet, secluded town. Out of professional habit, I instinctively greeted him. My job is a bit like selling health insurance. You can't ask too many questions or be too blunt. If he were just standing there by chance and I walked up and asked, "Planning a funeral?" I'd probably get punched. Are you the owner?" the young man in the uniform asked. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" I replied cautiously. "Yes, I need to arrange something." "Alright, come on in and have a seat." I ushered him inside and brewed a pot of tea, then sat by silently, waiting for him to speak. "My grandma died. How much does a funeral cost?" the young man stated directly. I paused, a little unsure, and asked, "Has she already passed? Or is this a pre-arrangement?" Good heavens, if she'd passed away a while ago. It was certainly taking him a long time to get around to this. I stroked my chin, considering. Looking at his clothes, I figured he wouldn't have much money, so I cautiously offered him a basic package. "It depends on what you'd like to do. A simple service would be around $10,000 to $15,000. Not simple. I want the biggest one," he said. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't help but re-examine him from head to toe. I had my suspicions. Could this be a competitor sending some kid to stir up trouble for me? Such underhanded tactics were common in my line of business. The thought flashed through my mind, making me even more certain that something was off with this kid. So, I quoted him the price for our most extravagant, high-end service, and added an extra $20 to it. The highest tier package is $120 I said, taking a sip of tea and saying no more. It wasn't that I was looking down on him. Most residents in this remote area were elderly farmers. Whether they had money or not was one thing. The question was if they were willing to spend it. To my knowledge, I could count on one hand the number of people in this town who would shell out for a high-end funeral. The young man in the uniform glanced around my shop, his eyes settling on a papier-mâché 60-inch flat-screen TV. "If we do this, can we get a big TV like that?" "You bet," I assured him. "A big TV? I could even make you a papier-mâché Cadillac Escalade if you wanted." A faint smile appeared on his thin, dark face when he heard this. He unzipped his jacket, pulled out a red plastic bag from inside, and placed it on the table in front of me. "Here's the money," he said. I was stunned. The plastic bag was filled with stacks of cash, roughly estimated to be around $50 to $60. I swallowed hard, then carefully averted my gaze and told him, "According to policy, you only need to pay a 30% deposit of the total cost up front. The remaining balance can be paid in 2 installments later." He looked at me confused, then pushed the money toward me. "The rest is at my house. I'll get it for you there." Seeing how straightforward he was, I didn't refuse. I accepted the money, and after discussing the various steps and procedures, I took his address and phone number, then hurried off to prepare the necessary items. Evergreen Village is one of the many hamlets in Willow Creek, located in a very remote area. At the village entrance stood a black stone tablet, ancient and weathered, its engravings barely visible due to the erosion of time. Following the address the young man in the uniform gave me, I realized there was a long, narrow path leading to his home. Our vehicle couldn't go through, so we had to carry everything by hand. My buddy, Mike, complained the entire way. Mike's been my best friend since college. After graduating, he bounced between several jobs, none paying more than $3,000 a month. As my business grew, I eventually called him in to help me out. He studied literature in college, and according to him, his working with me in this remote village meant the downfall of a new generation's literary giant. Alex, I'm not saying you shouldn't take jobs, but why'd you bring every last thing from the shop? Mike asked, panting under a huge backpack. Heh, this is a big one, Mike, the full-service, top-tier kind, I said, quite pleased. This job alone would bring in almost half a year's income. Mike stopped dead in his tracks, turning to look at me. Holy cow, top tier? You're not messing with me, are you? He looked utterly disbelieving. In the 2 years he'd worked for me, he'd never encountered such a large-scale job. Instead, I'd forced him to learn many essential skills, including performing funeral rites. You've always wanted to perform, haven't you? Now's your chance to shine. I chuckled, watching him with amusement. Just picturing his plump figure wiggling on stage made me want to laugh. Holy cow, I thought you were just messing with me. There's actually a show? Even if the folks here don't have high expectations, don't mess it up for me. Just get through the first half of the night, I warned him. Mike shrugged indifferently. In college, he had the thickest skin. Streaking across the campus or confessing feelings to girls in their dorms, he was always the first to do it. So, when it came to being in the spotlight, Mike was more than happy to oblige. At this point, old Mr. Henderson, who was walking at the back of our group, chuckled. Haha, I'll record Mike's performance, and it's sure to go viral. Mr. Henderson is a chef and handyman who I've worked with for a long time. Whenever I get a job, I call him to cater the funeral feast. Though he's plain-looking and scrawny, his skills are anything but. Other chefs need several assistants to cook for large gatherings, but he doesn't. With a seamless series of moves, he can cook for 7 or 8 tables by himself. That's why I pay him well, usually $1,000 per event. This time, you're helping me carry things back too, Mr. Henderson. I'll pay you extra, I said, a little apologetically. Oh, it's nothing, just buy me a drink later, he replied. Finally, after we three had moved everything from the car to Evergreen Village, it was almost noon. Upon arriving, I called the young man in the uniform to arrange the location for the feast, the stage, and the funeral hall. After quickly eating some bread we had brought, we got to work. I was in charge of the funeral hall, Mike handled the stage and equipment, and Mr. Henderson managed the catering. Given our years of teamwork, we were confident we could finish by 5 p.m. The feast and stage were set up in the village's central square, on the only concrete platform. However, 2 funeral halls were set up, one in the 2-story building next to the square, and another at the deceased's residence. At first, I didn't understand the young man's request, but when I saw his grandmother's house, it became clear. Her house was tiny, just a 150-square-foot shack. Even though we were arranging the highest-tier funeral, Evergreen Village's remote location made it difficult to bring in large items, and time was short, so the setup was a bit simpler than usual. While we were busy working, a few curious villagers gathered around and started chatting with us. Are you the ones that young fella, Billy, called to arrange the funeral? A plump middle-aged woman interjected. I paused, mentally trying to figure out who Billy was. Ma'am, is Billy the one in the green school uniform? That's right, that's him. What's up? The woman looked around, then suddenly leaned in and whispered. Oh, you shouldn't listen to him. That boy's had problems up here since he was little. She pointed to her head. I was completely confused. What's all this about? And fooling us? He already paid me, the woman grumbled, but out of habit, she asked. Did he tell you his grandma died? Yes. And did he say she passed away a while ago? Yes, he did. Oh, that rascal. He pulls this trick on the villagers, but now he's trying to fool outsiders too. Ma'am, what kind of trick? I asked. Actually, I didn't care much about these things, especially since I'd already received the final payment from the young man for arranging his grandmother's appearance. Now, listening to the middle-aged woman ramble, I was simply indulging my curiosity. What kind of trick? His grandma's perfectly alive. He's just going around telling everyone she's dead. What a terrible thing to do. My eyes widened in disbelief. No way, ma'am, you're not serious, are you? Why would I lie to you, child? I saw his grandma just yesterday, weeding in her vegetable garden in the backyard. The woman, true to her gossipy nature, went on and on, even spilling the young man's family history. Listening to her detailed account, I started to get a bad feeling, but then I thought, I've already got the money, so who cares if she's dead or not? So, I just focused on my work. By 4:30 p.m., everything was ready. The young man in the school uniform, now wearing a beige one, stood quietly in the funeral hall beside the concrete square. This makeshift funeral hall had no coffin, only a large, 3-foot square portrait of the deceased. 6 tables for the feast were set up, all filled with people, no decent liquor, and they're calling this a feast? How embarrassing. An old man with white hair grumbled. Exactly, 10 or so dishes for a table, who's that enough for? It's gone in 2 chopsticks. The villagers spoke unkindly, but their chopsticks never stopped moving. In contrast, the actual funeral hall was eerily quiet. A basin of yellow paper offerings burned brightly, and paper items were piled up in a corner. Of course, the papier-mâché Cadillac Escalade I promised the young man was there too. In front of the portrait, a straw mat was laid out for mourners to kneel on, but no one approached to pay their respects. It was as if they were merely detached observers, uncaring of who had passed, simply there for a quick meal. Mike, Mr. Henderson, and I had finished our tasks long ago and were now standing under the canopy set up outside. Oh, wow, Mr. Henderson said, clearly surprised and at a loss for words. Mike, however, was visibly agitated, clenching his fists. These old jerks are really enjoying their food. They have no shame. Look at that old coot over there. He's even packing leftovers. All right, don't stir up trouble. We're just here to handle the funeral, I said, emphasizing the last 3 words. Earlier that afternoon, while we were setting up the funeral hall, the woman had told me about the young man's family. There were 4 of them. The young man had a high fever as a child, which affected his brain, making him sometimes normal and sometimes not. So, he and his grandmother worked on the farm year-round, while his parents worked as laborers in a big city. A few years ago, his parents died in an accident at a construction site, leaving behind a $300,000 compensation. For rural folk, $300,000 was an unimaginable sum, something they couldn't possibly earn in a lifetime of farming. At first, the villagers felt sorry for the family and helped them out, but as the saying goes, it's not being afraid of thieves stealing, but of thieves plotting. As time passed, some villagers began to borrow money from the family under various pretexts. Initially, they managed to borrow, but as requests grew, the well ran dry. So, when they couldn't borrow, they slandered, and with more slander, the family became targeted and isolated. Even the few kind-hearted villagers dared not associate with them anymore. This situation was conveniently amplified by the grandmother's death. People feared the taboo. Otherwise, in a few more days, they might have resorted to outright robbery. Sigh. I sighed, flicking my cigarette butt away. I pulled out $3,000 from my pocket and handed it to Mr. Henderson and Mike. This kid's had it rough. Let's pay our respects and liven things up for him. We took the money into the funeral hall, each bowing our heads once. The young man in the uniform stood still, watching us silently. It wasn't until we put the money in his hand that a flicker of light appeared in his eyes. He glanced at us but said nothing. The fiery setting sun slanted across the concrete square, casting long, slender shadows of everyone present, stretching from their feet towards the funeral hall, as if to pull them into an abyss. By 7 p.m., on the makeshift stage in the center of the concrete square, 2 large floodlights shone brightly, making Mike's belly shimmer with golden light. Dressed in a sky blue opera costume, he was singing melodiously to the accompaniment from the speakers. Mr. Henderson and I, sitting below the stage, were laughing uncontrollably. As expected, only a few dozen people had come to listen to the performance, mostly those who had finished dinner with nothing else to do or nowhere else to go. I gestured to Mike from below, indicating for him to hold down the fort. Then, with Mr. Henderson, I hurried to the young man's grandmother's house. As previously agreed, I also needed to help him find a burial site. The burial had to be done overnight. Otherwise, given the villager's attitude towards his family, it would never go smoothly for his grandmother to be buried within the village. Upon reaching the small house, the young man ushered us inside. A 6'5" black lacquer coffin lay against the wall, making the already small room even more cramped. "Do you have any clothes your grandmother wore regularly?" I asked directly. "Yes, I do," he replied, then turned to look for the clothes. I walked towards the coffin. Since I had arranged his grandmother's appearance earlier that afternoon, the coffin had not yet been fully sealed, leaving a 1-inch gap. As I approached, I instinctively peered inside. The white-haired grandmother, dressed in a black shroud, lay peacefully within. For some reason, seeing this scene, I couldn't help but recall what someone had told me earlier, that his grandmother was still alive. The young man said his grandmother passed away 2 days ago, but the villager claimed to have seen her in the backyard garden yesterday. It was hard to tell what was true. I pulled at the edge of the coffin lid, signaling Mr. Henderson to widen the gap. As the gap widened, the orange light from above gradually illuminated the inside of the coffin. I observed the grandmother's body, examining every inch without missing a single detail. Her hair was neatly combed, her face wore a slight smile, her hands were folded across her chest, and her black shroud was smooth and unwrinkled. Everything was just as it had been when I finished preparing her, calm and peaceful. Yet, I felt deeply uneasy, a chill creeping up my spine, though I couldn't pinpoint why. It was as if a heavy hand pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I suppressed my unease and, with Mr. Henderson, sealed the coffin, hammering in the wooden nails. With everything prepared, I picked up the clothes and the bulging backpack nearby, and we headed for the back hills. The sky had long turned dark, and a faint crescent moon cast only a dim light. In a higher, open area of the back hills, I took out the deceased's often-worn clothes and a 30-foot red string. I threaded the red string through a hole in the chest of the clothing, and Mr. Henderson held one end, pulling it taut. Then I lit the clothes, and with the burning clothes as the center, Mr. Henderson slowly walked in a circle, holding the string. "Alex, what new trick is this? I've never seen you use this before," Mr. Henderson asked, pausing his circling, confused. "It's drawing a prison on the ground. We're using an object with the strongest lingering essence of the deceased as a guide, aided by masculine energy, to create a symbolic cage," I explained. "It sounds a bit spooky, doesn't it? Weren't we supposed to be looking for a gravesite? Don't stop, whatever you do, don't stop until the clothes are completely burned," I urged, seeing Mr. Henderson start walking again. When I opened the coffin earlier, I got this creepy feeling, like something bad was about to happen, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So, I figured it's better to be safe than sorry. Something I instinctively felt uncomfortable about. That's my subconscious combining all my life's knowledge to make a judgment faster than my conscious mind. It's like that feeling when you meet someone new and instinctively dislike them or feel repulsed. So, I always trust my gut. There must be some detail I missed or didn't notice. While I pondered, I followed behind Mr. Henderson, spreading a thick, red mixture of cinnabar, ink powder, and pig's blood along his path. The moment the red liquid formed a closed circle around us, the flickering flames that had been weak moments before suddenly intensified and leaned sharply towards Evergreen Village. "Oh no, something's definitely wrong," I exclaimed, quickly motioning for Mr. Henderson to run back towards the village. A piercing sound of a Swona horn sliced through the quiet village. When we reached the deceased's house, we were utterly shocked by the scene inside. Broken pieces of wood, scattered yellow paper, and a ransacked wardrobe left the entire room in disarray. I quickly ran to the coffin. The previously nailed-shut coffin lid now had a 20-inch wide hole. Sharp wooden splinters lined the edge of the hole, mixed with black fabric strips, as if someone had forcibly squeezed out from inside. I peered into the hole, and the body that had been lying inside was now gone. "Damn it, it's a reanimated corpse." "Well, what? A reanimated corpse?" Mr. Henderson stammered, trembling with fear. "No time for that now. We need to find Mike and the young man in the uniform first," I said, helping Mr. Henderson out of the small house and heading towards the concrete square. The sounds of Swona, clapper, and drums echoed through the silent village, but Mike's singing was nowhere to be heard. My heart was pounding. I hoped Mike was okay. "Mr. Henderson, when we were nailing the coffin shut, did you feel anything strange?" I asked. "A little, yes, especially when I saw that body's smiling expression. It sent shivers down my spine," he replied. Same here, but I didn't see any signs of reanimation then. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sealed the coffin," I said. I recalled the reanimation guide passed down in the funeral business. The first sign of reanimation is the appearance of mold-like white hairs on the corpse's surface, followed by dehydration and blackening of the body, and then the corpse rises. But I hadn't seen any white hairs then. I only felt that inexplicable sense of dread. However, all the evidence at the scene clearly indicated it was indeed a reanimated corpse. The more I thought, the more confused I became, unable to find any answers. Any reanimated corpse, whether a zombie, a living corpse, or any other type of cadaver, would invariably target their own kin first upon awakening. I don't know the exact principle behind it, but the traditions passed down from ancient times by Taoists, Buddhists, and folk practitioners certainly have their reasons. I secretly planned my next steps: first, find Mike, then find the young man in the uniform. As for the reanimated corpse, if we can destroy it, we will. If not, we run. When we reached the concrete square, there wasn't a single person in sight. Only overturned benches, tables, chairs, and an empty stage remained. I pulled out my phone and called Mike, but it went straight to voicemail. Where could everyone have gone? I muttered to myself. It had only been 3 hours since 7 p.m., but the village had been completely turned upside down, and we still knew nothing, except that a corpse had reanimated. Mr. Henderson and I discussed it and decided to ask the villagers what had happened at the scene, then piece together any useful clues. We went around the stage and walked deeper into the village. Although it was past 10 p.m., a few houses in the village still had their lights on. We headed towards the lighted houses, hoping to find some villagers who were still awake. Approaching a house, I gently knocked on the door. To my surprise, the door opened smoothly at my touch. It was apparently unlatched. "Excuse me, Mr. Henderson," began, but I quickly clamped a hand over his mouth. I subtly shook my head, signaling him to keep quiet. In this situation, even if we were mistaken for thieves, we absolutely couldn't make a sound. Who knew if that thing was inside? I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The living room was also in disarray, just like the square outside, as if it had just experienced some chaos. I continued to investigate silently. Honestly, 3 consecutive places being so chaotic gave me a bad feeling. To the left of the living room was a bedroom. The bedroom door was wide open, and it was pitch black inside, with no lights on. I walked towards the bedroom doorway. The moment I stepped inside, my foot landed on a slippery liquid, and I slipped and fell. Before I could even register the pain, the smell of blood hit me directly. No, it's a bloodsucker. I quickly scrambled backward out of the bedroom, using my hands and feet. Before I could even feel the pain, the pungent smell of blood assaulted me. Oh no, blood! I quickly scrambled backward out of the bedroom, using my hands and feet. Before I could even register the pain, the pungent smell of blood assaulted me. In the living room light, I looked at my hand. Crimson blood slowly dripped from my palm onto the floor. Holy cow, Mr. Henderson, this time, didn't get weak in the knees. He immediately helped me up from the floor. Once I was steady, I ignored the blood on my clothes, quickly pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and found the light switch for the bedroom. I swear I'd never seen such a bloody scene in my life. The bed, the floor, the walls, the wardrobe, everywhere was spattered with blood. Mr. Henderson retched and threw up. My heart pounded. I couldn't imagine what could have happened to cause such a horrific sight. "Hey Alex, what in the world is this monster?" Mr. Henderson was almost crying, but being a man, he held it in, making his words jumbled. I looked at the blood all over the floor, recovering my senses from the shock. Judging by the amount of blood, it's at least 2 people. The bedroom showed no signs of struggle, only the bedclothes were a bit messy. Clearly, the incident happened on the bed, and there were only bloodstains, no bodies. Among reanimated corpses, there are some that don't drink blood, but I've never heard of one that eats flesh and bones clean, I thought, trying to find even the slightest useful information. Just then, Mr. Henderson tugged at my sleeve. I turned my head, puzzled, to look at him. He pointed to the ceiling, his mouth wide open, only a dry gasp escaping his throat, clearly terrified. I followed his gaze to the ceiling. On the white, smooth ceiling, countless vivid red handprints and footprints were scattered everywhere. By their size, they seemed to belong to adults, and the handprints and footprints on the ceiling extended from the bedroom all the way to the living room door. Evidently, whatever it was had crawled out through the ceiling. Seeing this, a vague guess finally formed in my mind. So, I dared not stay any longer and pulled Mr. Henderson out the door. The moment we stepped out, a hysterical scream echoed from a house not far away. Mr. Henderson and I exchanged glances, both seeing complex emotions in each other's eyes. Run, or rescue? People are always afraid of the unknown. In this situation, going to save someone, to say we weren't scared would be a lie, but Mike's disappearance meant I couldn't think about that much. I brought him here, and I had to bring him back in one piece. We found 2 butcher knives in the kitchen of the house we had just been in, and I instantly felt a bit safer. Halfway there, the screaming came again from the same direction, vaguely saying something. It was too far to hear clearly. I instinctively tightened my grip on the knife handle and sped up. In front of a small courtyard, the large iron gate was wide open. The house was noisy, accompanied by a few faint groans from men. I stood at the doorway, quietly peering inside. In the center of the room, villagers were crowded together, and the groaning sounds were coming from within the crowd. I relaxed, and with my hands behind my back, I hooked my finger at Mr. Henderson, signaling that it was safe. After pushing through the crowd, I realized the villagers were not surrounding just anyone, but the young man in the uniform. He was covered in dirt, his uniform and jacket torn and lying on the ground. His face was bruised, making it swollen and unrecognizable. "Give me back the money." "No, no. Returning the money means death," the young man cried hoarsely. "He's talking nonsense. Who the hell owes you money?" a man in a black shirt yelled, kicking him. "Exactly. Just because you say someone owes you money doesn't mean they do," several village women said sarcastically. I quietly walked forward, pushing through the crowd, intending to pull the young man away. Although I didn't understand why he had suddenly changed from his usual numb state, since he was my client, I decided to help him out first. "Hey, what the man in the black shirt began to curse, but seeing me covered in blood and holding a butcher knife, he swallowed his words. I ignored the terrified faces of the others and, pulling the young man up from the ground, I looked around and said, "Believe it or not, the young man's grandmother has reanimated. The people in that 2-story house on the east side of the village have already been killed. If you don't believe me, you can go see for yourselves. If the reanimation really has something to do with not paying back money, then you're in big trouble." With that, I swung the butcher knife in my hand, and the crowd immediately parted, creating an opening. I pulled the young man out of the crowd and, with Mr. Henderson, walked toward his grandmother's house. Once there, I helped the young man sit on the bed. After a few minutes, seeing that his emotions had somewhat stabilized, I finally spoke. "Why did you say that if they don't return the money, they'll die?" The young man glanced at me, remaining silent, still staring at the ground. Even though I was anxious and eager to understand the full story, I had no way to make him talk. So, I changed my approach and asked again, "Do you want to know what your grandmother has become?" Upon hearing this, the young man trembled almost imperceptibly, as if afraid of something. Seeing his reaction, I relaxed. Based on what had happened tonight, I explained my findings. There are many types of reanimated corpses, but most can be divided into 2 categories, dead corpses and living corpses. Dead corpses are simply those that develop incredible abilities due to changes in the surrounding environment's energy. However, no matter how a dead corpse changes, it will not develop consciousness and its body will remain stiff, acting only on instinct. The zombies we often see in TV shows or novels belong to this category. The young man's grandmother's reanimation belongs to the other category, living corpses. Living corpse doesn't refer to the body's vital signs, but rather to something else controlling the corpse, making it appear indistinguishable from a normal person. Any individual who becomes a living corpse must have undergone an internal transformation. The reasons for the creation of living corpses are diverse and complex. Their abilities might not be as great as zombies, but they are absolutely among the most dangerous and bizarre. Unlike dead corpses, which mindlessly attack living people without fear of danger, living corpses usually act with a specific purpose and possess some ability to discern danger. If you don't know their core motivation for coming into being, you can't predict their movements. Furthermore, all types of reanimated corpses will inevitably target their kin first. I don't know why you're still alive right now, but if you don't tell me why not returning the money means death, I think it won't be long before the entire village becomes a graveyard," I said. I saw that he was still staring blankly at the ground, and I felt a surge of anger. "All right, Mr. Henderson, pack our things. We're leaving." I stood up, pretending to leave, pulling Mr. Henderson with me. The ledger, the ledger. I pulled my foot back from stepping out the door and sighed in relief. What ledger? My grandma's old ledger. It records everyone who borrowed money. So, anyone who borrowed money and didn't pay it back will be sought out? Yes, yes. I saw Grandma crawl out of the coffin, clutching a notebook in her mouth, and head towards the east side of the village. I was organizing my thoughts, about to ask more questions, when a sudden shock ran through me. The ledger, I blurted out. Mr. Henderson was startled by my reaction. What ledger? Remember what I just said about the conditions for a living corpse to form? I asked. The money is the fundamental reason for his grandmother's reanimation. Although I don't know how much money his grandmother lent out, it's clear the old woman valued this money greatly. She couldn't collect it when she was alive, and after her death, it became an obsession, giving rise to this resentment, which led to her reanimation. I lit a cigarette. Now that I understood the full story, the invisible pressure weighing on me lessened considerably. So, finding the people who owe money means finding his grandmother, right? That's certainly one way to look at it. I agreed, but I still can't figure out Mike's disappearance. Just as we were discussing how to find Mike, we heard faint footsteps outside the door, at 4 a.m., in a small house in Evergreen Village. The creaky old door hinges groaned, making a grating sound that grated on the teeth. Pale moonlight streamed into the room through the slightly open door. Strangely, there was nothing in front of the door. The right half of the wooden door seemed to be pushed open by the wind, slowly swinging inward. Gradually, the door opened wider and wider, revealing more of the room, with a bit of light even seeping into the side bedroom. In the side bedroom, a sleeping man on the bed seemed to sense something, pulling the blanket higher up his shoulders restlessly. Plop, plop. The man's snoring abruptly stopped. He touched his face, then suddenly sat up in bed. What the man cursed, then turned on the bedside lamp and looked at his hand. In the dim light, dark red liquid was slowly dripping from his palm down to his wrist. For a moment, the man didn't react, staring blankly at his hand. Plop. Another drop of dark red liquid, coincidentally, fell into his palm. The man shivered, looking up at the ceiling. In the dim yellow light, a person was crawling on the ceiling, head rotated 180 degrees, silently looking down at him. After a few seconds of staring, the person on the ceiling suddenly lunged down. Back at the young man's grandmother's house, several villagers consciously avoided the coffin near the wall and rushed into the room, effectively squeezing Mr. Henderson and me onto the edge of the bed. Little master, you absolutely must save us, an old woman with white hair, who seemed to be the leader, pleaded. Don't panic, tell me slowly what happened. I said. Actually, I didn't want to bother with these people. I preferred to let them fend for themselves, but Mike hadn't been found yet, and the whereabouts of the resentful spirit were still unclear. After getting crucial information from the young man, I conceived the idea of using these villagers as bait. Since they were already asking for my help, I decided to play along. I gathered all the people who owed money, hoping to attract the resentful spirit to them, and then I could calmly search for Mike. Last night, when I was pouring out the foot-washing water, I saw his grandma standing right at the courtyard gate, staring straight at me. The old woman spoke, occasionally glancing back towards where the coffin was, as if someone were inside. It scared me so much, I immediately called my son to come stay with me. And then what? I nodded. At first, I thought I was seeing things. Then I asked a few old neighbors nearby, and they all saw her too. The people gathered around the bed immediately nodded in agreement. Little master, do you think we've seen a ghost? I'm an old woman. I don't want to be harmed by a ghost. You must help me. The old woman's emotions grew more intense, and she strayed further and further from the point. I had a bit of a headache and quickly waved my hand to interrupt her. Do you know why it's targeting you? I suddenly asked, making the people around me fall silent, looking at each other. After a long silence, a man said, Didn't you say it was reanimated? Can a reanimated corpse still be considered human? It must just bite anyone it sees, just like in those zombie movies. He spoke self-righteously, and several people next to him nodded in agreement. Bullshit. You're about to die and you still won't admit it. You deserve to be bitten to death. I hadn't even spoken, but Mr. Henderson, who was sitting to the side, couldn't hold back. He slammed his hand on his thigh and stood up with a jerk. I tugged at Mr. Henderson, signaling him to calm down. What you did has nothing to do with me, and I don't want to get involved. I just want to ask you, Do you want to live or do you want to keep your money? If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do. You'll just have to wait and see." With that, I pulled Mr. Henderson, pushing through the surrounding villagers, pretending not to want to be involved. "Hey, don't, little master." The man panicked and grabbed my arm, flattering me. I turned my head and looked at him coldly. "So now you're scared? First, I told you that the reason for the reanimation is that you didn't pay back the money, which caused his grandmother to develop a powerful obsession. Second, just paying back the money now won't work. She's already fixated on you. Then, what? What do you say we should do?" "We'll listen to you," he said. I pondered for a moment, then laid out my plan one by one. "Gather all the people who owe money. That way, we can wait for her to come to you, and you won't have to worry about being picked off one by one. Then, tell everyone to bring all the money they owe, every last penny. Remember, not 1 cent less, unless you want to die." I paused, then added, "Finally, don't get separated. It's best to move together. Meet back at the square in half an hour." The man nodded, listened, and didn't ask any more questions. He led the others out in a hurry to get ready. After everyone had left, only Mr. Henderson, the young man, and I remained in the messy room. Mr. Henderson asked me, worried, "Are you really going to help them? These jerks treated the grandmother and grandson so badly, and you know it." As events unfolded, the truth became clearer. Anyone could see how truly awful these people had been. These days, there are too many people who borrow money and don't pay it back. Since we're here, we might as well help them get some of it back. I'm not purely helping them. Let's just get the money back first. Otherwise, do you think these jerks would ever pay up? "You're right," he said, "but do you have a plan to deal with that resentful spirit?" "Not much of one. We'll take it one step at a time," I replied. At the concrete square, I found my toolbox tucked away in a corner of the shed. Inside, I pulled out a black backpack, my dedicated kit for ritualistic tools. From it, I extracted mo dough, canned pig's blood, glutinous rice flour, a brush, and other items. I instructed Mr. Henderson to find a basin and mix some of the ingredients in it according to specific proportions. Meanwhile, I moved several long benches to cordon off a roughly 2-square-yard area in the center of the concrete square, taking the ink string, now imbued with the mixed liquid, from Mr. Henderson. I began to wrap it meticulously around the outside of the benches. Then, within the created circle, I repeatedly crisscrossed the ink string diagonally, forming a dense, spiderweb-like pattern until the entire enclosed area was covered. After finishing, I checked the time. It was almost 5 a.m. Still unwilling to give up, I dialed Mike's number again. After a few rings, the call connected. Run now." Mr. Henderson's frantic voice came through the phone. "Run where? You can run, but the temple won't," I retorted irritably. Behind you." I froze, realizing something was wrong. I quickly took a step forward, grabbing a clump of ink string from the ground, and turned around. At the edge of the square, an old woman and a young man stood motionless beneath a tree, silently watching me. Since they were calmly standing here, the villagers' fate was already clear. I tightened my grip on the ink string and stood still, staring at them. As the two of us faced off, staring at each other, the other person spoke. "See, can you help me one more time?" From the shadows, one of them spoke. The voice was unmistakably the young man's. "Go on," I said, though I was inwardly horrified, maintaining a calm facade. "Sing a funeral opera for my grandma one more time." "All right, but tell me where Mike is first," I said, agreeing readily but also stating my condition. If they didn't agree, then it would be a lose-lose situation. "He's in the storage room of that house behind you," he said, and then, fearing I might worry, he added, "He's safe, just asleep." I checked the time, 5:02 a.m. Dawn would break in another hour. Without further ado, I turned to tidy up the stage, reconnected the equipment, and once ready, I told Mr. Henderson, who had been hiding in the nearby 2-story building, to go find Mike. I wouldn't start until I saw Mike. The grandmother and grandson stood quietly at the edge, watching coldly, not interfering. About 5 minutes later, Mr. Henderson called out, panting, "Alex, I found Mike. That rascal's sound asleep." Hearing this, I didn't waste any more time. I picked up my phone, played the instrumental music, and began to sing. Many people in town could organize a funeral, but I was the only one who could perform a funeral opera. Funeral opera is often considered a mere superstition by most, but its significance is far greater. People enter this world with cries, but they leave silently. Therefore, performing this ritual is a way to mourn the deceased and help them rest in peace. I suppose the young man's intention was for me to soothe his grandmother's last bit of resentment. Life is short, goodbyes are long. As the farewell song ended, the young man in the uniform slowly approached, his movements slightly stiff, and handed me an old, worn notebook. "Everything you want to know is in there," he said. I took the yellowed notebook and silently watched him. This quiet, somewhat naive young man's pupils were filled with white, lifeless. After handing me the notebook, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness with his grandmother. Light gradually appeared in the sky, and a loud rooster crow echoed through the village. Mr. Henderson and I sat at the edge of the stage, silently smoking. After Mike woke up, we packed our things and left this oppressive little village. On the way, Mike asked me, "Are those villagers who owed money all dead?" I rolled my eyes and cursed. "We're lucky to be alive. And you're still worried about others?" Mike fell silent. Back at the shop, I tallied up the money earned and the debts collected from this job, a total of $250,000. But I wasn't happy. I converted the entire amount into equivalent, ghost money, intending to write the grandmother and grandson's names on yellow paper each Memorial Day and burn it for them somewhere. I never opened the notebook, knowing too many bad things can affect one's state of mind. Just honestly do your part and have a clear conscience, and you won't fear ghosts knocking on your door. The end. Thank you all for your support.